Welcome to Azure Teach.net. In this video, I'll show you ASP.NET Core Web API authentication and authorization using Azure AD. This is based on a real-time use case that I have worked on. As it is shown in the diagram, I worked in an application which consists of an API, a console application, and a web app. Responsibility of the console application is to trigger emails every day at particular scheduled time with the PDF documents related to insurance, and business users uses the policy manager web apps to make updates, inserts into the database through policy manager API. So as this policy manager console application is only responsible to read the data and trigger email, we gave read-only permissions to this application. And as users uses the policy manager web app to read-write, so we gave read-write permissions. Please note that this is an enterprise application. There are various roles available, but I am using read-only and read-write roles here to make it simple. We are going to see a baby version of this application. Please subscribe to AzureTeach.net for more tutorials on .NET and Azure based on real-time scenarios. We are going to create an API app and two client apps. One client will have read-only permissions and the other client will have read-write permissions. First step is we have to create the app registrations. Number of app registration depends on the number of apps that uses Azure AD. So here we have 3 apps, so we have to create 3 app registrations. Here I am in portal.azure.com. To create the app registrations, we have to go to Azure Active Directory. And here I am clicking on Add button and selecting app registration. First I am creating the API app. I'm giving the name as API app. Click on register. And we'll repeat the same for 2 client apps. So I'm going into the default directory, clicking on app registration, read only, client app, and again going back to the default directory, and here I'm choosing app registration, read write client. As the first one is an API app, we have to do some configurations. So go back to the app registrations and go into your API app. And here we have to choose expose an API. Click on that. Click on set. This app ID URI serves as a resource identifier when we access this app for getting the tokens. In this demo, we are going to use application permissions, but if you want to use delegated permissions, you have to add a scope. Delegated permissions means like if your app uses the permissions of the logged in user, then we have to define a scope here. But in this demo, we are going to use the application permissions. Our application will have 2 roles. One is read only and another one is read write. So we have to create app roles by going into this app roles link. Create app role and choose the display name as API.readOnly, and I'm giving the same value here, and I'm using applications only, and I'm giving the same description, and click on apply. Again click on create app role and give API.readWrite and choose applications and choose the value as the same API.readWrite and description as same. Click on apply. Here I am creating ASP.NET Core Web API project. Click on next and I am giving the name as API application demo. Click on next and click on create. The application is created. We have to add a NuGet package to this application to make this application work with Azure AD. So I'm going into the manage NuGet packages, go to browse and search for identity.web. We have to install Microsoft.identity.web. So I'm not choosing the preview version, I'm choosing the stable version, which is 1.18.0, and clicking on install. Accept. The package is installed. First, we have to configure our Azure AD configuration in appsettings.json. So here I'm giving the name as Azure AD, and in this we have to add few properties. One is instance. So when the client application accesses this API app uses this URL to validate the authentication token. So it will be https://login.microsoftonline.com, and we have to give the tenant ID. So the tenant ID should be tenant ID. We can get this information from an app registration. So go here, you can copy this. So go back to the application and paste it over here. And also we have to give the client ID, and here we can copy the client ID. So here we are not giving any callback URI or any secret or the client secret, because this API app is so simple API app, and in this we are not going to call any other APIs. Now let us go to startup.cs and add using Microsoft.identity.web, and here we have to add services.add web API authentication, and to this we have to pass the configuration. So here we have a default parameter Azure AD, and I gave the same name for the Azure AD configuration, so I'm not passing this. If you choose a different name, you have to configure this, and here we have to add app.use authentication. Now let us create a controller. Right click on the controllers, add controller, choose API controller empty, add, give the name as names controller. Now let us create a models folder, add new folder, models, and inside this let us create a model, add new class, name model, and in this I am creating two properties, first name and last name. I want to keep this demo short and crisp to the point that we are discussing, so I don't want to add any fancy code related to entity framework. I want to add an in-memory database. So here I'm adding a new class. I'm naming this as data, and inside this adding a property public static list of name model. Names list is equal to new list of name model, and inside this let us create two objects. So new name model, I'm giving the first name as Adam, last name as King, and copy this and paste it. Let us give the first name as Robert and last name as William. Now go back to our controller. Here let us add two action methods, iActionResult get names. This action should simply return the list of names that we have. So return OK data.nameslist and give authorized attribute, press Ctrl dot and choose Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.authorization. And to this let us pass roles is equal to, we have two roles, so we have read write app and also read only app, so this should be accessible by both the applications. So we have api.readwrite, copy it and paste it here, comma, and api.readonly. Now I am copying it and pasting it over here, and now we have to create a method for the client which has read-write permissions. If a client has api.read-only permission, it should not be able to access this method, so I'm removing this, and I'm giving the name as post name, and here I'm giving from body and name model. Here I am giving data dot namelist dot add name model, and I am returning the name list. Now I'm adding routes to these actions. So I'm defining route and I'm giving the name as get names. And for the second action, I'm giving the route as post name. That's all. That is what we have to do from the API side. Let us do the configurations for the client apps. Here I am in portal.azure.com. I'm going into Azure Active Directory and into app registrations. Here we have two client apps and one API app. We have to give permissions to the client apps on the API app. I am duplicating this tab two more times. Two are for the client apps and one is for the API app, as we need all these configurations later while we are testing this setup. So first I am going into the first tab and choosing read only client app and going into API permissions and clicking on add a permission and choosing my APIs. And here we have the API app, click on that. And here by default the delegated permissions are disabled because we haven't given permissions to the users, and also we haven't added any scopes. That's the reason the delegated permissions are disabled. We have application permissions only by default. So as this is the read-only client, I'm giving api.read-only permission and clicking on add permission. As we are using application permissions, this needs admin consent because admin has to know about the application due to security reasons if you are working in a large organization. So I'm clicking on grant admin consent for default directory. This button will be available only to the admins. At present I am in my admin account, so that's the reason this is enabled. So if you don't have admin permissions, you cannot grant the admin consent. I'm clicking on this, clicking on yes. This part is done. Now go to the second client, choose the read write client, go to API permissions, and here add a permission, go to my APIs, API app, and here I am choosing api.readwrite, add permissions, give the admin consent. Now let us test our setup using Postman. Later we can do this using .NET Core applications. Here I am running my API app. The application is running successfully. I'm going into the Postman and I have added a new tab. First we have to get the token from the Azure, and after that we'll use the token for authentication and authorization when we are accessing our API app. To do that, go to our first app registration and overview endpoints and choose the token endpoint. Here I am choosing v1 endpoint, copying it, go back to Postman and paste it over here. We have to pass few parameters to this endpoint to get the token. So I'm going into the body and I'm choosing form URL encoded. First we have to give the grant underscore type parameter. It should be client credentials as we are using application permissions. And after that we have to give the client ID. So I'm giving the client ID. We can get the client ID from the app registration overview section. And here we have the client ID. Copy it and paste it over here. And we have to pass a client secret. We haven't generated the client secret yet. So go to the read-only client tab and go to certificates and secrets. Choose new client secret and I'm giving the name as read only client secret. Clicking on add, copy this value and paste it over here. Now we have to pass a resource. In this we have to mention the resource that we are trying to access. Here we are trying to access our API app. So go to our API app and here expose as an API, copy this URL and go back to the Postman and paste it over here. Let us test it. So we got the token. Now we have to test our API app. So I am adding a new tab and I'm going to the browser and copying this endpoint, pasting it over here. So our controller is at the host address slash API slash names slash get names. So if you see in the Visual Studio, we have API slash controller, that is names slash get names. So go over here and we have to pass the token. So I'm going into the headers. Here I'm adding authorization. I'm going into the first tab and copying the token. Copy the token and paste it over here. Bearer space. Now hit our endpoint. So we got the response. Now let us test if this client app is able to access the post name or not, because we gave read-only permission to this client app. So I am changing my endpoint. So here I am giving post name, and in the body I'm choosing raw and choosing JSON over here, and here I'm giving first name as Mary and last name as Evelyn. Now I'm testing it. So if you see here, it gave us 403 because this client app doesn't have permissions to access that endpoint. Now let us duplicate the first tab. Let us test our second client tab. So I have duplicated the first tab. So I am going into the body, and here we have to change client ID and client secret. So I am going to the second client app, and here in the overview I am choosing the client ID and I am copying it. Go here and paste it. Now go to certificates and secrets, create a new client secret. So I'm giving the name as readwrite client secret. Click on add. Copy this value and paste it over here. Rest of the parameters will stay as is. Now I'm clicking on the send button. So we got the token. Now I am duplicating this tab because we have to test the read write permission for the second client tab. So here we got the token for the second client. So why we are saying this as the token for the second client? Because we gave the client ID and client secret of second client app registration. So I'm going here. So here in the body, we already have the required data that we are passing, and in the headers, let us add the token that we got. I have pasted the token and clicking on the send button. Now we got success response, and the Mary Evelyn should be added inside the list. So if you see here, the details are added inside the list and we got the name list. Now let us test if this app has read-only permission or not. So I'm going here and I'm changing this to get names and I'm hitting the send button. So this body is not required now. So I'm hitting on the send button. So we got the success response. That means this app is able to access both of these endpoints. Now let us test our logic using the client applications. Here I have created two console applications, one for the read-only client, another one is for the read-write client, and I kept the API running. And here inside the read-only client app, here I'm declaring a variable string token is equal to get token. So we are going to replicate the same things that we have done in the Postman. Like first we'll get the token and after that we'll use the token to access the API app. So I'm generating a method over here. The method is generated, and now here I'm declaring few variables, static string, client ID. So if you look here, this is identical to the thing that we have done with the Postman. So I'm in the first tab of the Postman where we have the read-only client details. So I'm going to read-only client and pasting it over here. And after that we have to define static string authority. Authority means the URL from where we can get the token. So we can take this URL. Please note that we have to take the URL up to here. We should not take the auth2/token. So I'm going back to the application and I'm pasting it over here. And after that, we want to declare one more variable, static string client secret is equal to, let us go back to the Postman and copy the client secret and paste it over here and declares static string resource, paste the resource ID over here. Now we have to add a NuGet package to get the token. Go to manage NuGet packages, browse and search for Microsoft.identitymodel.clients.active directory and install the package. Access package is installed. Now inside this method, let me remove this hello world. Now I'm inside this getToken method. I'm writing authentication context, press Ctrl dot, and we have to use this namespace. And here context is equal to new authentication context. To this we have to pass the authority. And now I'm declaring client credential. Client credential is equal to, because this object is needed when we are acquiring the token. So to this we have to pass client ID and client secret. And now return context dot acquire token async. So to this we can pass the resource. We have already declared the resource at the top and the client credential. And here, as this is an async method, I don't want to await. I just want to take the result directly and it will return the token object. So if you see here, it will return authentication result. So from this we have to take the access token. Here I am writing get names and post name. To this I am passing token, and here also I am passing token. Press Ctrl dot generate method. Again on post name, press Ctrl dot generate method. And here let us write code for the get names first. And here we can use HTTP client. Press Ctrl dot, we need system.net.http. HTTP client is equal to new HTTP client. We have to add the token in the authentication header. So HTTP client dot default request headers dot authorization is equal to new authentication header value. And we have to mention the scheme. Scheme is bearer token and the value, that is the token. Now let us create a HTTP request message. Request is equal to new HTTP request message, and we are going to use the get method over here. So it is HTTP method dot get and the URI. Let us go to Postman and copy the URI. So copy it over here and go to the application and paste it over here. So here we are testing get names, and after that we have to mention the content. Request dot content is equal to new string content. As this is a get method, we are not passing anything, so I am giving string dot empty. After that we have to use encoding dot utf8, and after that we have to pass the media type, so that is application/json. Now here I'm writing HTTP client dot send async, and here we have to pass our request object. And as this is an async method, we can use the result to take the result. So where response is equal to, now here if response dot is success status code, then we can use console.writeLine to print the response. So here I'm using response dot content dot read async. So as this is an async method, again we have to use the result. Else I'm printing the status code. Response dot status code. Now copy the same code, paste it in the post method. Here we have to mention this as post and the URL as post name, and instead of string.empty we have to pass the content. I have pasted some JSON content over here. Let us add few console.writelines here to differentiate the responses. So here I'm writing get method, and here I am writing console.writeLine post method, and at the end I'm writing console.readline. Now let us run the application. So here for the get method we got the response, and for the post method we got forbidden, because here we are using first client app details and this is a read-only client app. Here I have copied and pasted the code of read-only client in the read-write client, and everything is same. And also I have added required dependency over here. The only change that we are going to make in this application is changing client ID and client secret. Go to Postman and copy the client ID of the second application which has read-write permissions. Go to read-write client and paste it over here, and go to Postman again and copy the client secret, paste it over here. Let us run this application. If everything works, as this application has read-write permissions, it should be able to get the details and also post the details. So both the requests are successful. So here in the post method, the request that we have passed is inserted into that collection. That is all in this demo. If you like this video, please give a thumbs up to this video and also subscribe to AzureTeach.net for more videos on Azure and .NET. Thank you.